one of the most recent things that you dissected is that how the CRO role is changing. And you framed it as what used to be rewarded as a CRO 1.0 and what's being rewarded now as a CRO 2.0. So give us the thesis and then we'll dive in.
A big problem that I see, Google CROs on LinkedIn, you'll get a lot of them, and you look at their backgrounds, most of them were promoted from being just a VP of sales. A lot of that skill set was focused on new business acquisition. There is a whole world of revenue across the customer journey that goes beyond new business sales.
As a chief revenue officer, you find yourself facing a substantial challenge due to not prioritizing the customer experience as a key driver for revenue maximization. While you're busy orchestrating strategies across sales, marketing, and customer support, neglecting the customer journey leads to dissatisfied clients, decreased loyalty, and fewer repeat sales. Overlooking these aspects then spirals to missing out on opportunities for upselling, cross-selling, and referrals, ultimately leading to a significant revenue gap. How do you fix this? Kevin Chiu knows exactly how. Kevin Chiu is the co-founder and chief operating officer at Catalyst Software, a leading technology company specializing in workplace collaboration solutions. With a background in engineering and a passion for innovation, Kevin played a pivotal role in shaping Catalyst's products and driving its growth, earning recognition for his visionary leadership in the software industry. In this episode of the Run Revenue Show, Kevin emphasizes the importance of prioritizing the customer and their needs throughout their journey with the organization. He shares the significance of focusing on long-term business outcomes and customer lifetime value rather than solely concentrating on new business acquisition, and why CROs need to adapt and innovate their revenue generation strategies in response to changing market scenarios. Want to learn all of Kevin's secrets for driving revenue? Make sure to stay tuned throughout the whole episode. This one is packed full of wisdom.
I'm Kyle Coleman, sales pro turned SVP of marketing at Clary. Run Revenue is the show where revenue pros learn to stop revenue leak, achieve revenue precision, and grow their companies and careers.
This is Run Revenue Show with Kyle Coleman.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Run Revenue Show. I'm super excited for this episode. I'm joined by my friend Kevin Chiu, COO and founder of Catalyst. Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing really well. You wrote a very provocative LinkedIn post recently, and we're going to dive into that, talking all about this evolution of the chief revenue officer role from CRO 1 to CRO 2, and we will get very deep in the weeds. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your role at Catalyst.
Yeah. So my name's Kevin, obviously, and I run a company called Catalyst Software with my lovely brother, Edward Chiu, who also lives in New York City. I'll save this story for another time, but we also lived next door to each other at one point. Literally, he was in 1C, I was in 1A. We had dogs in the same layer. So very close for the Chiu brothers. And I started my career in tech sales leader by trade, worked at a company called 5 Stars, then went to Greenhouse here in New York, and then ended up joining him at a company called DigitalOcean. And I ran the sales team there. He ran the customer success team. And that was how I got my first lens into the world of customer success. And eventually we started Catalyst, and the idea was basically born at DigitalOcean from a need of understanding where is all this data? Like, is it in CRM? Is it billing? Is it in usage? Who's at risk? Who's not at risk? He ended up building the product internally because he looked in the market for things and didn't find what he wanted. And long story short, we left DigitalOcean, started a company called Helix, actually. Not a lot of people know this. And then when we started Helix, a mattress company and a DNA company had raised like $100 million in New York. We're like, we should probably change the name. In hindsight, I like the name Catalyst better anyways. And so here we are, fast forward 5-6 years and talking to one of the greatest hosts of all time.
Awesome. Good stuff, Kevin. And you probably more so than anybody you're a real student of the market. You're a student of the revenue technology space, sales, marketing technology, and go-to-market roles. And the dissertations that you do on LinkedIn breaking down your POV on the market is really remarkable, and it's worthwhile for everybody to go and check out. And as I mentioned in the opening, one of the most recent things that you dissected is that how the CRO role is changing. And you framed it as what used to be rewarded as a CRO 1.0 and what's being rewarded now as a CRO 2.0. So give us the thesis and then we'll dive in.
Yeah. So I think there's two real points that I would like to address on this topic. So one is, in every organization out there that I talk to, whether it's the CEO or the CRO or the CCO or VP of sales or VP of CS, there is this push-pull of sales versus customer success. There's who owns what, who owns renewals, who owns expansion. And it almost becomes more about business ownership than business outcome. And the only thing that matters is positive business outcomes. And that's how you should design the organization. And a big problem that I see firsthand as someone who is traditionally sold into the world of customer success, that we're kind of pivoting to much more than that, just being a revenue platform, is CS leaders, 50% of the time, give or take, report into a CRO, right? They don't report into the CCO, or the CCO reports in the CEO. And it makes sense logically, because if you own a renewal and expansion number, that is a very commercially oriented conversation, right? It requires negotiation skills, requires contract management, requires inspecting deal risk. Now, the double-edged sword of that is a lot of CROs. I mean, you Google CROs on LinkedIn, you'll get a lot of them, and you look at their backgrounds. Most of them were promoted from being just a VP of sales who ran an SDR team and an AE team and maybe a sales operations team and throw in sales engine. A lot of that skill set and team was focused on new business acquisition. And as you know firsthand from a lot of the CROs and CCOs and 2.0 versions that you talk to, there is a whole world of revenue across the customer journey that goes beyond new business sales. And so the post that I was, throughout there was illustrating the risk that not only these CRO 1.0 kind of have in the business, but also the business as a whole when you have someone at the helm of the revenue organization who only really understands one component of it. You're leaving so much money on the table.
That's right. And so to summarize, the chief revenue officer role really was born from a graduated VP of sales and was very focused on new logo and very focused on bringing in that style of revenue. And of course, that's important, especially in times of growth. But as you correctly point out in the post, that growth orientation right now in 2023 is not what's chief most on everybody's mind. We are very much focused on protecting your customer base, protecting your revenue, and trying to figure out how to expand. So talk to us a little bit about how the current macroeconomic environment has been a forcing function for this CRO 2.0.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible point that you took from the post, and that was a big one for sure. So look, one of the things that I said was markets create roles. I really do believe that. And in the previous market that we're in, let's say pre-2020, right, or even 2021, you could say that new business growth was highly, highly rewarded. Every board deck was just all about the hockey stick chart. Every company wanted to be on the unicorn list. You Google top 50, 100 unicorns on CB Insights list. A lot of those companies are raising down rounds. A lot of those companies have done not one layoff, not two, maybe three, maybe four. And you look at companies on that list, their revenue multiples were insane. They would be 10 million, 15 million ARR valued at $1 billion, $2 billion. And it just economically did not make sense. So that is what the market rewarded. All the VCs kind of jumped and kind of fed into it. And basically, when you have a market that is designed like that, you create an organization around it, right? And so you create an organization that maybe you hired more people than you needed to, and then now you have to lay them up. You hired a revenue leader that knew how to grow top of the funnel new business with a lot of capital, right? Money was not a problem. You could hire as many SDRs as you needed. You didn't need to look at CAC or payback period. It was like throw money at everything and it just solves itself. You fast forward to this market, it doesn't work for a lot of reasons, right? I actually prefer less SDRs that are surgical with their outreach. And you know this very passionately from the content you write. Outbound is a disaster. It was a disaster pre the economic crash. It's even more of a disaster now. Every single day as a founder, and my title is COO. So it's a hot keyword search for SDRs, I'm in Zoom meetings all day and I get 50 emails, another 20 in-mails every single day. I'm not joking you. And it's all just kind of spam. And not only have I just completely ignored it, you couple that with a market where my VP of finance doesn't want us buying any tools. Even as a founder, I'm getting hand slapped for maybe spending a little too much money taking clients out to dinner. I got to explain. And like, that just wasn't a thing that I experienced before. And it's the right thing to do because we all need to be very budget conscious. Where are we spending our dollars? A dollar out needs to at least bring $2 in. And so that coupled with consolidation, right? Products like Vendor, products like Tropic that are literally just canceling SaaS seats automatically for CFOs. New business teams are getting shredded. There's no one really wants to buy anything right now and they can't. And not only is it affecting sales teams, it's affecting marketing teams because nobody's requesting demos because there's no incentive. They know they can't buy anything. And so that's why you have to think about another way of generating revenue. And obviously the one that Catalyst preaches a lot is you're sitting on a massive install base. Not only do you need to protect it, but you need to know how to grow it. And so that hopefully that gives you a little bit more context on the.
Absolutely love that. And I'll go back to the first thing that you said, Kevin, because I think it's so profound. And it jibes nicely with this quote I've heard from Charlie Munger that stuck with me for a long time, which is, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. The market was incentivizing growth. The market was incentivizing throwing money at problems, ignoring CAC, ignoring some other pretty key SaaS metrics for the sake of valuations and for the sake of growth multiples. And that is no longer the case. And so CROs that are still operating that way, or who frankly were trained to operate that way, are going to be struggling in this environment, which is demanding something very different. So Kevin, talk to us about some of the blind spots that you're seeing CRO 1.0s having in today's market.
Yeah. So CRO 1.0, there's a couple of blind spots that I would say. There's a lot, but I'm going to highlight two. So the first one is CRO 1.0s that grew up in the world of just SDRAs and sales ops. They oftentimes don't understand that ARR, annual recurring revenue comes from recurring impact. And that's, I want to make sure, because I took that line from Winning by Design. It's a beautiful one. And I might even get it tattooed. I like it so much. It seems straightforward and it's often not. Recurring impact is something that needs to happen every single day. It's not something that happens 4 times a year in this thing called a quarterly business review, where you beg the person that bought your product to talk to you for 60 to 90 minutes and you tell them how much value they're getting. That is such a not good use of time. It's so much more in favor of the vendor. It's not customer focused. It's not customer led. There's actually, I would say, very little in it for the customer. And, that's why I talk a lot about like QBRs need to go, and we'll park that for a separate conversation. But that is an example of recurring impact not happening. And when you have recurring impact, it's much easier to grow from the customer base and land and expand, higher renewal rates. Here is an example of moments of impact that don't typically happen. You sell a product, right, over time, and the company gets bigger. And as the company gets bigger, there's more product releases, there's more things to know. Most companies are really, really bad at enablement. And let's put together a world where sales reports into one function, CS reports into one function. You would be very surprised at the product that the SDRs are pitching to the product that marketers are marketing, to the product that AEs are starting to demo, to the product that IMs are implementing, to the product that CSMs are making them get adoption, and to the product that they think they're renewing. And from the customer then, they told you the exact 3 problems that they needed to solve, right? So an example would be, if I wanted to buy Clary, there's 3 problems I want to solve. I want to increase conversion on stage 3 opportunities. I'm not getting good visibility there. Clary provides me that level of visibility. We're having a hard time forecasting with Salesforce, and we need a better product for that. That's purpose built. And we need to better roll up our forecast in the weekly revenue meeting on Tuesdays. Now, if you solve those problems for me really, really well, then I'm going to renew because I got exactly what I needed from it. Oftentimes that process from sales to CS to renewals, it becomes a black box and it's never even talked about again. They don't even know. Maybe it's not even documented. And so when you're running forecasts on a renewal motion, there's a lot of different information and things you need to capture and process that candidly just lacks a lot of discipline from customer success leaders that are more service oriented. They've never been trained in the disciplines of medic and Salesforce and all those things. There's a method to the madness. And CROs might have that skill, but it's been predispositioned to new business. And that is a fraction of the entire customer journey. So that's the first problem. The second problem is,
Can I, Paul? I want to get back to this, Kevin, but there's so much to dig into there that I'd be remiss if we skipped it. There's a wonderful essay by Paul Graham, who's the founder of Y Combinator, and he's talking all about how to do hard work. And what he says is that a lot of times people and teams, companies, they trick themselves into thinking that you're doing hard work by kind of nibbling around the edges of what the real hard work is. And an example of that you reminded me of is we're QBRs, these customer QBRs that we're running. We're telling ourselves that the revenue teams, CROs, CS teams are telling themselves that this is the hard work. But if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, that's just nibbling at the real hard work. That's just the outer ring of the real problem that we really need to address, which is this always on approach to impact. Is that a fair characterization?
yeah, I would say 100%. There's a quote that I look at too, along with that's a great one, is just because you're busy doesn't mean you're being productive. Now, you spend 3 hours gathering all the data that you need across 17 different systems for this QBR. You don't get the right training on how to run a great QBR. You don't know how to do the great discovery. You don't know how to close the loop on the positive business outcomes and business initiatives that they bought the product for in the first place. And you just start to get in the motion of running QBRs for the sake of them. And I was at a dinner and I asked the room to raise their hand. And I was like, hey, how many of you here buy products, right? Like you are the economic buyer. The whole room raised their hand because they're all CMOs. And I said, how many of you have ever attended the QBR that the rep asked you to attend after? Maybe 2 people out of 30 raised their hand, right? So you could see the conversion start to drop off. And I said, when they email you, what does the email say? And the email says something like, hey, Kyle, I know that you bought the product on this date. Can we catch up and talk about this year's growth and all these things? Like that in itself has nothing to do with the customer. It just has to do with the vendor trying to get more money. And people, the customers understand that. And so they've delegated it off to like a middle manager to show up to these QBRs. And the other problem is CSMs and AMs that are running QBRs, they think they're talking to a champion. They're not. They're probably talking to a coach. They're probably talking to someone 3 to 4 levels away from the actual person who signs the check, let alone the actual finance team that gives the final sign off on this making sense. And so the way we were running QBRs, which was not a good use of time, made sense in an economic climate where capital was free. No one's really watching, right? Every organization had 25 seats on Asana, 37 seats on Notion, another 100 on Google Docs. No one cared. It was just money was everywhere. Money was flowing. And in a market where tools like Vendor and Tropic are canceling, people are freaking out because they need to protect revenue, right? As you guys say, often it's revenue leak. That is a very, very big problem. It is the number one killer for any organization.
That's beautiful. And I'm sure we could talk a lot more about this topic of QBRs. And hey, if you haven't written a post about it already, maybe you have. I need to go find it. If you haven't, I'm going to implore you to do that so that I got to go track that down. So that was blind spot number 1, was this blind spot of providing that recurring impact. Tell us more about the second blind spot that CRO 1.0s are experiencing.
Yeah. So the second blind spot I would say is a lot of CROs think that it's not that they think, they've just been trained to run forecast methodologies that take activity data from sales reps. That might be, maybe it's a call, maybe it's an email. And then a lot of tools in the market will identify what's the level of engagement you have with this champion. How often are you talking to them? That's how they assess the deal risk. When you think about renewal an expansion deal risk post customer acquisition, it's actually much, much different. You have to understand the success plan. Did they receive the positive business outcome of why they bought the product or not? How's the adoption? How's the utility and usage of the product? Are the champions using the things that they intended and getting the outcomes that they wanted? And a lot of that data might be stuck in a data warehouse. It might be stuck in a Redshift or a Snowflake or a Databricks, right? And no longer is it okay to just have systems of record that have only CRM data, oftentimes when that CRM data is outdated. And you know that problem very well, right? You go into the CRM that everybody in this world has and you go look at it. It's outdated next steps. It's outdated close dates. It doesn't have the right information that you need to make the right decisions on pre-sale processes, let alone post-sale processes, which include so much more customer data that is oftentimes siloed. So I think the things that CROs of tomorrow or today's market need to be more equipped in understanding how aggregating lots of complex, important data into one singular place, doesn't matter where it is, as long as it's in one singular place, can help them and the revenue operations team make the right business decisions.
It's really well said. And I know that's one of the main value props of Catalyst. To give you a little credit here, you and your brother, co-founder, Edward, you've spent a lot of time getting all of those integrations super seamless so that revenue teams can pull in all the different important data that they need to really understand the health of their accounts, the health of their relationships, the likelihood of expansion, of renewal, whatever it may be. And integrating across all those different data sources, and some of which you already mentioned, is critical. And totally right. I can see how that'd be a major blind spot for CROs who are just not used to operating that way. So now, transitioning a little bit here, Kevin, your role as a COO, you're deep in the strategy weeds, but you're keeping a really close finger on the pulse of who all are involved in generating revenue. And in this same post, talking about CRO 1.0 versus 2.0, you mentioned it's support, implementation, professional services, partner teams, channel sales, all these different revenue critical organizations that maybe a CRO 1.0 wouldn't see. So how has your position as a COO given you this broader purview into thinking or rethinking about all the teams that truly are revenue critical for Catalyst?
Yeah, for sure. So in that post, I highlighted a lot of different organizations that generate revenue. A couple of the ones that people wouldn't necessarily think, right, is you can charge for support tiers, right? That is an extra revenue line item that you can start to charge for. It's in fact one that Catalyst will be charging for soon as well. There's ways to charge for professional services, partner sales, channel sales. One of the easiest things that I think people actually don't run very tight processes on is the concept of a CSQL. So a customer success generated lead. And if you're going to have a CS organization talk to customers, they should be having strategic business conversations that they are enabled to do deep discovery, understand, are the customers achieving the positive business outcomes that they were looking for? And what other positive business outcomes can your product provide? So an example is people buy Clary, right? Clary's got a big suite of solutions. People probably don't buy the first one or all of it all at once, right? You guys now offer, I know, a lot of things that compete with Gong. So they might have Gong as a call recorder and they might use you for the forecasting, and you're incentivized to get them technically off of the Gong call recorder to use Wingman. And CSMs, if they're interacting with the customer, they have the first line of sight into when is the right time to reach out to this person about that. And that's where moments of impact come really, really key. It's about timing is everything in sales, and timing in renewals is no different than timing in sales. Is when Kyle hits that moment of impact on Clary's product and the CSM identifies it, they should immediately be alerting the commercially driven stakeholder that is assigned to grow that account and say, hey, here's the meeting that I just had with Kyle. Here's the stats on how we're achieving positive business outcome 1, 2, and 3. They're at peak usage. Their account's never been healthier. I gently probe the idea of getting them off of the Gong call recorder to the Wingman call recorder. Here are the reasons why they should switch. Now go reach out and have that conversation. If that type of seamless transaction and handoff does not happen, then what is the alternative? It means that CSMs are working in a silo. The AM or the growth account AE is also working in a silo. CSM logging into their customer success tool, logging information. AE and AMs never log into that tool. They log into Salesforce or something else. They don't see that the CSM had that conversation with Kyle. Then they reach out to Kyle and is like, hey, I'd love to talk to you for an hour and a half about your growth upcoming next year. Not realizing that Kyle just had a conversation with CSM. You see what I'm getting? It's like, it's such a disjointed effort. And so you really need to unify that customer experience for the customer, not for the organization, or for the organization needs to change for it to have the impact that it needs for the customer. So those are some of the simple tweaks. And I would actually share something else is not only is it about the functions, it's about the tactics. I was at a CRO conference with Sales Assembly and I was talking to almost 250 revenue professionals. And I had this slide up of 15 different ways to generate more revenue through your customers. That's not just in new business sales. And so an example of one is people oftentimes reach out to their customers for references. And I wouldn't even say that's a sales job. Marketing does that for them. They offer a Peloton bike or something. And people, as much as they want a Peloton bike, I'm sorry, they just don't have time. And so not only do they not have time, they don't send in any referrals. So the thing that we've done and the thing that we teach our customers to do is you should be using data to identify high quality champions and references. What does that mean? You merge CRM data, you merge it with usage data, merge it with NPS, and it'll give you a holistic picture on like, here are the 37 best customers and best contact. And then you merge it with LinkedIn data and you say, here are the last 4 companies that Kyle worked at that fit your ICP. And then you send them what feels like a personalized email and it comes from someone important, let's say the CEO. And it's like, hey, Kyle, Kevin here, Catalyst founder. Know that you're really loving Catalyst product because of X, Y, and Z data points and the conversations that you've been having. I couldn't help but notice that you worked at company A, company B, company C. I would love to talk to these 3 people. Do you think you can make that happen? And if you have a good operations team, you can make that happen in a really seamless, automated fashion. That is personalized, targeted customer outreach that helps you generate more revenue from the base. And there's a lot of tricks like that. Like you can use products like a user gems to track not only when champions leave your install base to go to another organization, but you can track when they come in to your organization. And so when you think about all the different ways of revenue, it's not just cold outbound emails anymore. It's many different ways of generating it.
I absolutely love this. To your first point that you made around the disjointed customer experience that could exist when internal teams are not aware of customer conversations or customer interactions, having been on the receiving end of that, Kevin, more times than I care to admit, it is so frustrating. It makes me question why I'm doing business with these people at all, and makes me think like there's got to be another vendor who would take care of me better, who would treat me better, who would actually go out of their way to provide more value for me. So it not only can sour or reduce the chances at expansion, as you were talking about, you could be teeing yourself up for churn if you're not truly, and I know it sounds simple, but you really truly need to make sure that your internal teams are collaborating, are sharing information, have clear roles and responsibilities, and are always cross-pollinating about what they're learning inside of accounts. So I love that point. And then your second point about the tactics mattering just as much as the functions is critical and is a good segue into the next topic that I had for you, Kevin, which is a lot of people listening to this have been in CRO roles for some time. Some of them are brand new, but I suspect many of them are the profile that you discussed. They grew up via the pre-sales organization. They had SDR and AE and sales engineering, and now they're in a whole new world. So talk to us about maybe some more of those tactical type things that could allow CRO 1.0 to thrive in this new world and become more of that CRO 2.0 profile.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a couple of the things that they could start doing is, one, they just got to invest the time in educating themselves on there. And so there's a lot of content that companies like Catalyst provide on the concept of customer-led growth. One of the biggest things that I've seen CROs of the 1.0 industry start to invest in is customer operations. Like that is a very, very different skill set in understanding all the operational aspects that go into customer success land across support, implementation, professional services, all of those things, and the tools and technologies that CS organizations need to extract data and give opportunistic ways to generate more revenue through your customers. And so I think that that is a really, really good example. Easy ones is, I think that there is going to be a world where CROs, you can call it CROs, you can call it CCOs, you can call it whatever you want. Catalyst believes that these two teams, sales and CS, they shouldn't be two teams. That in itself, me saying it is already making me cringe. It should be one team. It is the go-to-market team. It is the customer team. Everything should revolve around the customer. And so I think whether the CRO owns it or not, they need to start working incredibly closely with whoever is the owner of the customer organization and think holistically about what is the customer experience that the customer should have and be going through to extract the most amount of money. An example is I was talking to the CRO of Atlassian, brilliant gentleman. And he gave me this example of when he was running the revenue organization, he made an assumption that if he just sold them the most amount of stuff upfront to generate the most highest total contract value upfront, that over time, that customer would be super successful and also made the numbers look really good in the beginning. And then eventually, because they were a very data-driven organization, and that, again, that takes data beyond just CRM data. It takes usage and analytics and insights and it's everything. But Atlassian, I would say, is a very, very data-driven organization and a very data-driven leader. What this CRO noticed was eventually he compared two cohorts of customers to understand which cohort was making more money. And so the cohort A was customers that bought the most upfront, or cohort B was customers that bought significantly less of. They bought less upfront, so there was less to focus on, but the things that they had to focus on, they adopted incredibly well. And so that's where this customer journey of recurring revenue comes from recurring impact. You buy 100 things at once, you can't get recurring impact on all 100 things. The human brain and organization can only handle so many things at so many times. And that's the best example I've heard of a CRO truly analyzing the customer journey. You need the data, the operational insights, people, the right technology to put together a story, to A/B test different customers going through that journey and make tough business decisions that say, I'm actually going to not sell customers more upfront because the better business outcome over time and customer lifetime value as a shareholder, if I'm going to be at this business longer than a year, is that 5 years from today, that customer is going to be worth 4 times more money. That's the right business decision to make. And that is oftentimes a very, very tough one for CRO 1.0s to make because they only think about new business. They think about how many opportunities can I generate? How many deals can I close? What's that year 1 revenue? They don't think about year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. And also, to be fair, their comp plans weren't really incentivized that way because CEOs aren't even thinking about that.
Exactly. Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I think what this macro environment is forcing us all to do, Kevin, is take a longer term view. You can't be seduced by short-term outcomes because those short-term outcomes just aren't happening. So you need to focus on the overall health of your business and the way that you're operating and the way that you're incentivizing your team, incentivizing yourself, thinking about success, maybe redefining success. And I think that's a lot of what the CRO 2.0 is it's a redefinition of what success is for a revenue leader. And one of the trends that you correctly spotted, which I think is super interesting, is how you're seeing so many chief customer officers make the switch to a chief revenue officer. So tell us about the trends that you're seeing and name drop a couple of people that have made the switch.
Yeah, for sure. So not only am I seeing CCOs and VPs of CS move into the office of the chief revenue officer. They're moving in the office of the chief executive officer. Like that's the
Yeah.
ultimate dream, right? Who doesn't want to be the CEO of an organization? That is the top leader function. And so you take a look at the CEO of HubSpot. What was their role? They were the CCO of HubSpot. What was their role before that? They were the CCO of Dropbox. And you take a look at the CEO of Logic Monitor. What was her role before? She was the CCO of Slack. And you're seeing these people who grew up in the world of customer success get into these super influential roles because that role is designed to focus on the customer. How can you provide the customer the most amount of value and extract the most amount of revenue throughout the customer lifetime value? And CS leaders have an unfair advantage in seeing through that lens. I think the switch that they need to have is they need to move from being just service leaders to revenue leaders. And they don't need to act commercially, but they certainly need to think commercially. And so 2 examples of CCOs that have gone into the CRO role is the CCO of Miro Sangeeta has moved into the CRO role. And she was a CCO, I believe, Okta and Checker before. And Rosie was the CCO of Hopin, and she's now the CRO of Hopin. She was the VP of CS at Salesforce. And the reason why I believe that's happening is, again, markets create and shift roles, the requirements, the responsibilities. And in a bull market where capital is cheap and you just have to go out and get more money by throwing money at the wall, you really only need a CRO who maybe grew up in the world of SDRs and AEs and sales engineering, sales operation. But in a market where that stuff isn't working anymore, then you really start to strip aside the title and you think about, well, what is the most important job to be done today? There's 2 jobs. There's number 1 job is protect revenue leak. You have to be surgical and with precision and understand where that revenue leak is coming from, whether it's new business sale or it's post sale. And I would argue that with data, that post sale revenue leak is far, far more expensive than new business revenue leak that hasn't even occurred yet. And so if that's job number 1, and job number 2 is not only do you need to retain that business, but you need to expand that business. So gross retention, GRR, and net retention, NR, the top 2 metrics in every single boardroom of every venture-backed organization out there, or not venture-backed, publicly traded, privately traded, or private markets. Those are the characteristics of what great leaders need to understand. And you pull back and you think about who fits that profile better. CS leaders, revenue-oriented CS leader, they fit that profile much better.
That's right.
Because there is a massive, especially for PLG companies, when there's a massive cohort of customers, it's not even about generating cold outbound. It might be just generating more customers from the PLG customers that are already sitting in your base. Completely different motion.
This has been so awesome, Kevin. And it sounds like what you're seeing is in the old world, there were kind of these 2 independent circles of a service orientation and a commercial orientation. And in the new world, those circles are overlapping. And the center of that Venn diagram where it does overlap, that's where the CRO 2.0 lives. You have to have the right combination between the service orientation and the commercial orientation. And that's how you're going to drive your business to success. That is how you're going to be able not just to survive this macro downturn, but to thrive and come out on the other side with a stronger organization and a better handle on how you're going to run revenue into the future.
Absolutely.
Good stuff, my friend. All right. We are somehow already out of time. That flew by, but I do have one bonus question. I can't let you leave quite yet because I'm very curious. You're a man of many interests. I'm curious to the answer to this question. What is a book, and this could be a business book or a biography or a fiction book or I don't care, novel, whatever, a book that's had a really big impact on your career?
This is a good question because I'm a terrible reader. I've never been officially diagnosed, but I have to believe I got some sort of ADD. It's like I sit there and read the book. I'm like, already lied. I don't even know what I just read. I just blacked out. I will say though, so I use this app called Blinkist, and it takes long books. Every book's kind of long, and it turns them into 15-minute digests. I'm a millennial, I guess. I can only handle short form content. And one of the best things that I reread was The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz and the A16 Squad. And the reason why I thought it was really good was I read it as the market was shifting, and it required me to step in, I would say step back into, this quote, it's not a favorable term, so I would never post this on LinkedIn, but for argument's sake, I'll say it on here. It's wartime leadership. It's a different type of leadership where you don't have a lot of resources. You certainly don't have a lot of time, and you make one wrong move and the company might be over. And every founder out there knows how much pressure it is right now. And so for me, look, the thing that I learned was, candidly, as a first-time founder, I don't know if Edward and I were running a profitable, responsible, efficient company. And there's been a lot of things that we've done in the last 18 months that have put this business in such a good financial stable position to weather the economic storm. And we're also incredibly grateful and lucky to be selling a product that matches the market times, right? Whether Edward and I were here or not, the market is demanding for better ways to protect and grow your revenue. And Catalyst just happens to offer that. But the way we were running the business before wasn't that much different than everybody else. We raised $70 million. We were a hot SaaS company. We were great Glassdoor reviews. There was money for us to throw at every single problem. The book Hard Thing About Hard Things teaches you about the tough business decisions you need to make as a leader. And for me, it shifted my mindset, which is sometimes I may have to make decisions that impact a few, or if I do nothing, I impact the entire boat. And I'm employing hundreds of people that have families and kids and paycheck that depend on the decisions that I have to make. And that carries a lot of weight and gravity. And so it's not a sob story, but being a leader is a tough job, whether you're the CEO, COO, CRO, because you're responsible for your team. You're responsible for the lives of many people, and you have to make the right decisions. And the right decisions are never the easy decisions. They're the tough decisions.
Unsurprisingly thoughtful. Really appreciate it, Kevin. Thank you so much for the time. Where can people go to find out more about Catalyst and to find out more about you?
They could check out our website, catalyst.io. They could follow me on LinkedIn. If they just type Kevin Chiu Catalyst, it should be pretty easy to find. And if they ever want anything, just reach out.
Good man. Thank you so much for the time. That's a wrap for this episode of the Run Revenue Show, starring Kevin Chiu, COO and co-founder of Catalyst. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
Don't let what you heard today go to waste. Take 2 minutes to download today's checklist to get your priorities in line for the week. You can find that linked in our show notes. And if you liked what you heard, make sure you give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. We'll be back next Monday with more to help you win your week.